Good morning. My name's Alan Pangbourne. I'm the CEO and president of Chesapeake Gold, and I'm happy to be here again today, Matthew, and to try and explain to you the metallurgy that we put out recently.
Well, Alan, good to see you again. I haven't seen you since May. Appreciate you coming back on, and we've all kind of been waiting to see what was said. And you put out a press release just before you got to Beaver Creek, I guess, in anticipation for all the kind of questions that you'd be getting. But I'm not sure people understood what you were trying to say. It was like super technical. We've had lots of questions sent in from across the world going, what does it mean? What does it actually mean? Were you deliberately trying to confuse people, or is it a case of perhaps there's a better way of telling that story?
Yeah, look, I think that's a valid comment. I've seen some of the chatter on some of the blogs and things, and also presenting it at Beaver Creek was a lot easier because I could, people could ask individual questions as I go. So let me try and simplify it a little bit and try and address some of the questions I've seen and explain how this all goes together.
Right, and can you just sort of set the scene before you do get into the numbers? Because this is, you've got these massive resources out there. It's a technical question about what can you, or if you can, recover what you want to recover. So we're talking about oxidation and rates, and we've talked really simple terms of grey stone, red stone. So what? Can you set the scene for us before we kind of get into the numbers and what they mean?
Yeah, sure. So we took over control of Chesapeake 18 months ago with a concept that would allow us to oxidize the sulfides, which is the reason that the gold is known as refractory, because it's locked in those sulfides. Once you oxidize them, you effectively release that gold and silver to then be leached with cyanide and lime, as everybody else does in a heap leach when it's an oxide ore body. That's important for probably 4 reasons. The first one is, as the PEA showed, 90% less capital than an autoclave plant, 90% less water than an autoclave plant uses, 90% less power than an autoclave plant uses. And then finally, unfortunately, after yet another tailings dam failure, no tailings dam. So those 4 things are what is really driving us to trying to get this to work and understand how it works, and what levels of recovery of gold and silver we can ultimately get. And the press release that went out was the first results that really give me a proof of concept. So it's now not, will it work? It's how long will it take me to get to the recoveries that I'm looking for.
Okay, and just again, remind us the numbers. Again, I'm just conscious there's lots of new people looking at this all the time, and we're sort of starting in through a conversation. So I would say to those people, I recommend going back to some of the other interviews that we've done with Alan previously. We go through the kind of history of how the new Chesapeake company is where it is today, some of the challenges ahead, but also some of the opportunities ahead. So maybe give us some of the PEA highlight numbers, which kind of, I guess, sets the scene in terms of the size of the prize if you can crack the code.
Yeah. Oh, look, the size of the prize is huge, not just for Metates, but probably for the gold refractory industry as a whole. So to give you some idea, Metates is over 20 million ounces of gold, 550 million ounces of silver in resource in the ground. We know where the elephant is. The question has always been, is there a economic, financeable, deliverable project there? The previous management looked at autoclaves. That wasn't economic because of the capital cost being $3.5 billion. We put out a PEA a bit over a year ago now that showed a capital cost of $360 million. It's focused on the high-grade intrusive breccia core, which is about 20% of the ore body to start with. The idea is to start with a smaller project of only 15,000 tons a day to keep the capital cost down, which was estimated at $360 million. And that would produce about 150,000 ounces a year of gold silver equivalent if we can get recoveries of about 70 to 75% of the metal. That is a typical to low-end oxide gold recovery. It was an assumption based on some very limited test work prior to this. And that would give us a cash cost of 760, I think it was, or 750 dollars an ounce, which is well under $1,000 an ounce, which seems to be the interesting level. 35% rate of return, 2.5-year payback. Since then, the metallurgical work has been moving forward to support those assumptions. The other things, if they go back and look at some of the older interviews, we drilled 5 holes to get material. We were pleasantly surprised when the grade was higher. We went by about 18% on average, which is significant. We went back and drilled another 18 holes to infill and also confirm whether that higher grade was pervasive in that intrusive, which it appears to be. My chief geologist is trying to explain to me why before we update the resource statement. I think it's important that we understand why it's gone up. So we're doing check assays and all sorts of technical stuff to ensure that we understand what's different. And then the test work.
Why would you be concerned if the values had gone up? Why is that a problem for you?
For the same reason I'd be concerned if they'd gone down. You know, at the end of the day, you want your underlying resource reserve statements are key to your economics, the same as the metallurgical recovery is key to your economics. You don't need to find out you're out by 18% when you start up. You need to know before that. So, you know, it's great. It's a nice surprise, but I want to be sure I understand why. I want to understand that it's real.
Right, but it's kind of important for your company, so the company which you've come into. I get that you've only been there 18 months, right? And there's a whole history to this before you came along, and this concern that you know the company could technically crack the code of being actually able to get the gold and silver out economically. But it kind of feels like there's like a commitment issue from the company to actually get stuff done. You know, you've got 18 million ounces of gold, 500 million ounces of silver. This is a huge project, but it's sitting there at, you know, 140 million market cap today because of this kind of commitment to showing the market how this thing, you know, can be valuable, will be valuable. So it's taken a long time, hasn't it? You can sort of understand the frustration.
Yeah, I think the issue is maybe it's my own conservatism. I don't want to put out one result, then another result, then another result, and they're up and down and all over the place, and it creates even more confusion. You know, I'm coming at this from more from a builder point of view, given my background, that I'm checking all the boxes, and as I know that this piece is right, I put it out. This piece is right, I put it out. You know, I'll put the resource statement out when I know I'm comfortable with it and it's right. It was the same with the test work. I mean, you know, the first column we started back on the 18th of May, and didn't put the results out until recently because there's a whole bunch of other work, even after you've oxidized it and leached it, to check that everything adds up, that, you know, heads minus tails plus what you recovered in solution actually add up to the same number. Yeah. And you got to do that
right,
work.
But you do got to do that work, but you also got to explain to people that what's happening, because no information, people run away and make stuff up. Believe me, I know. We see it every day. Where they're reading something into a situation where you're talking conservative, where they're saying, well, they don't know what they're doing. They're not able to crack this code. So there's got to be degrees of success along that journey, which you need to explain. Can you explain?
Yeah, there is, and that's why we put out what we put out just prior to the Beaver Creek conference, because that was a key marketing event for us to be able to sit down with investors. That's why I'm talking to you today, so that I can try and address some of the concerns that I've seen or heard from other investors with you and your audience, so that they understand where we're at and where we're going. And as I said, I've got a proof of concept. So now it's not if, it's how long, and can I tweak it to where I need to get to be. And there's a big difference between tweaking it and proving that it even works.
Right. So what does the mine builder in you, need to do going forward? So it might be worth actually talking through the Met work, because then I want to kind of actually go into, well, then what? Now what? What needs to be in place now? Because if you're going meticulously along a process to see, you're saying, how it works, and the audience is going, well, if it works. So I want to understand what that journey looks like, how long it is, and what those moments are, and how do you define success. So should we start with the network?
Sure.
Are you able to sort of run through the news release, or maybe the PowerPoint which you kind of ran through in Beaver Creek?
Yeah, I'll pick a few specific slides out of that one, specifically focused on the metallurgy. And so the first slide you should be able to see on your screen now. Everybody's seen this picture. This is the picture that I put out some time ago to try and show the investors that it is working. I just don't have any results yet. And as you can clearly see, we crushed this material to 13 millimeters and put it in the columns, ran the magic chemistry through it, and watched it change color. And so Alan was quite happy that it went from gray to brown, right? Which most geologists will look at and will tell you, okay, that seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. Good on you. When are we going to see some results? So we put some results out, and one of the key things in the press release is this slide, which is this graph that you can hopefully see now. And let me try and explain what this means. So the left-hand graph is literally how much of the sulfur or pyrite and other sulfides is oxidizing over time. This process is a two-step process. So forget the graph on the right. The graph on the left is the first step of the process. Oxidize the sulfides. Why?
Which is what I did in layman's, sorry, not even layman's terms, do it dumbed down version. What does that mean? Oxidization, 30 days and 30% in 128 days. What's that mean?
Right. So firstly, the oxidizing the sulfide means that the pyrite, fool's gold, which is where the gold is inside, will change from pyrite to rust, effectively, iron oxide. Okay? So not dissimilar to your car rusting. That's iron going to iron oxide. Pyrite will do the same thing. What this graph shows is it's a relatively straight line, at least for the first 128 days, and we managed to oxidize 30% of the sulfides in the entire sample. So not only 30% of the rocks oxidized, everything that had sulfides in oxidized to a degree, and we got 30% of that lot to oxidize. There's another couple of things that are important about this, because people will go, well, you've got 30% oxidation. Why is the gold recovery 60 and why is it so flat? And I'll come to the flat bit in a minute. Gold in pyrite tends to be in a couple of places. It's either on the crystal boundaries or on stress in the crystal. And how can I explain that? When something starts to oxidize, think about your car, right? And in Canada, we all drive around with salt on the roads, and we know very well where the car starts to rust first. And it always rusts where the steel of your car is most stressed. And where it's stressed is usually where it's been bent, where it's been welded, where it's been scratched, and the protective coating on the outside is gone, or it's very stressed. And that is exactly the same. Where the gold and silver is in the pyrite, it stresses it. So it oxidizes first, or rusts first, where it's the highest stressed. Yeah? It's like anything under stress. It gets annoyed. Yeah, and so it rusts. Once it's rusted, provided that rust is porous, then the iron, the air and water can get in, and the sulfate can get out. Because when it changes from sulfide, it goes to sulfate. Yeah? And I don't know how I can explain the difference, but sulfate is the oxide product that comes out of the sulfur. Yeah, and so what this graph, the first graph shows is it took me 128 days to get 30% of all that sulfur to oxidize. Once I'd done that, I rinsed it, and then I mixed it with lime and cyanide in the same column, and leached it just the same as I leach any other gold, silver, oxide ore, right? So think Nevada, think Australia, heap leaches all around the world that have been going on for decades and decades, okay? So that's the oxidation step. The second step is a standard gold cyanide leaching. Now, somebody commented that it goes really flat very quickly, and therefore it won't ever get to 70 or 75% as was in the PEA. When it's only oxidized to 30%, that is a 100% true statement. However, if I can make the oxidation run longer and go higher, or if I can make it get steeper and go faster to get to higher number, that plateau will move up. Right? So this shows that when I can, if I can oxidize it, which I can, I got 30% in 128 days, I can then get the gold and silver out. I got 60% and 50%. Of the total gold that was in the sample at the beginning before I oxidized it. This isn't an additive thing, right?
So it's not 60% of the gold for against the 30%.
No.
We're not multiplying 30 by Okay. So it's 60% of the contained gold prior to the oxidization process.
So if there was 1 gram per ton, which is about what our head grade is, in the rock before I did anything to it, by the time I'd finished, I could recover 60% of that, so 0.6 grams per ton. If the silver grade was 14, which is roughly what it was, by the time I got to the end of it, I recovered half, 7 grams.
7.
Okay?
Got it.
So,
Comprende.
So that's what this means, and everybody I've talked to, I've been saying the same thing. This is proof of concept.
Right. So, may I interrupt? Oxidization after 128 days, 30%. How do you improve the percentage? Do you just need to give it more days? Do you need to change the already tech? I mean, in terms of the blend, how do we get that from 30% to higher? And if it is higher, let's say it goes from 30 to 50%, what does that do to the gold recovery on the other chart?
Okay, so that line on the oxidation graph is I think you'd agree is pretty straight, right?
Yep.
So there's no concerns yet that it's slowing down. Will it? Of course it will. When? Good question. Don't know yet,
Right.
right? So
Right.
it's all about kinetics. Can I make it go faster or longer? And if I can't make it go faster, how much longer? And what does the gold and silver recover but improve by how much longer I run it? Okay. So what would it look like?
When can you answer those questions?
I'm working on them. that's the short answer is I'm working on them. There are some obvious things with kinetics that can speed it up. One is increase the surface area that is exposed. That
Right. So
means
crushing.
crush it finer. Yeah, we've already got some
That
columns running where I've crushed it finer and they look better. Yeah, and there's no numbers in there because until I've seen how much better is better, yeah, we've got to do the work. There's some other interesting things regarding reagent strengths. So without getting into really complicated chemistry and physics, if you increase the reagent strength, often it will allow the reaction to go faster. If you change the pH that you operate up or down, it will change the rate at which it reacts. And so we've got a series of columns. I've got 24, all of which are working on variants to see what does what as I change it, so as I can understand that A improved it, B didn't do nothing, C made it worse, D made it better, and so on. The alternative, and so that's one set, and then the alternative is run it for longer. But running it for longer has implications on your capital costs and your working capital build. So I'd rather find faster rather than longer.
If you'd say, can I answer this question here again? I'm just, Kevin, repeat that. It's 18 million ounces of contained gold and 500 million ounces of contained silver, right? Okay. Given the scale, it's fairly low grade stuff, but as we know, grade isn't always king. There's lots of other factors involved with this, and given the amount of help, stimulation this is going to need from you, there's going to cost to that, whether it be grinding, whether it be reagents, whether it be the whole process which you're going to have to put in place. Again, as a mine builder, there's a point at which you go, it's good enough, right? So you've got to give guidance to the market and go, we can optimize the heck out of this, but I'll need a couple of years because lots of combinations which we need to put together, and we can perfect this thing. But at some point, we got to press the button and go, right, we're going here. So when will you be able to give the market information that says, or guidance which says, like, this is a base case. If we went here, it's just fine. However, give me an extra year, and the relative cost of that year is negligible to what I think I'm going to be able to free up if we can extract more gold and more silver from this. I mean, how do you play that game? Because there's a frustrated audience out there. Your stock's being held back by that, I guess, that frustration and maybe some, I don't know, there's an overhang of retail. And I don't know what's going on there. But you bought into this company knowing the history, so you're prepared for what was to come. So how do you play that game?
So there's probably some practical economic limits on how far you can go tweaking it. God bless engineers. They always want to add more and more and more tweaks and more features. I'm very, very conscious of finding a economic, financeable, feasible, buildable, expandable project. And we want to start it small so as that hopefully you always want to get it right, but if there's something unforeseen, it's not completely fatal. So there's a trade-off, but I've still got to get, 60% recovery on the gold is actually not bad out of the refractories. If you compare it to what the no oxidation case was, which was 35 gold and 20 silver, yeah, which is contained elsewhere in the presentation, that's a significant improvement on what you would have got if you did nothing, right? But down that low, it's probably not economic. What's interesting about the 60% gold number is, if let's make an assumption, right? We've seen an upgrade of 18%. If you said, he'll get half of it, call it 10%. My recovery's down 10%, but my grade's up 10%. So last time when I went to school, 1 multiplied by 1.1 divided by 1.1 is 1. So I'm actually still in the same place economically. So theoretically, you could say, Alan, stop dicking around and get on with it. Yeah. But I still need to do...
I thought it did. That was exactly what I said earlier.
I still need to do... There's a whole bunch of other metallurgical test work that goes with all of this to be sure that this piece, one test from one place once is not success. It's a damn good indication.
But how do you get to the numbers where you can say, because look, the sheer scale of this thing gives you lots of optionality in terms of, the ore body that you can go after. Is there an argument which says, do you know what, if we can get to 70% extract recovery, that's a good enough number to get things going, or certainly get us financed to get things going in some small way, drive some revenue, which then stops this kind of dilutory component to these exploration and development stories, right? And we will refine the process over time. We've got time. This thing is generational in terms of size. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many ways you can come at this.
So 2 words that you just said that I'll pick up on. One was dilutive. The other one was financeable. Okay? Even though the capital is only $360 million, we will need to finance it, because last time I looked, my bank balance wasn't $400 million. Okay? So to get it financed, to get a bank to give you the money, there's probably somewhere between a year and 2 years of work that has to happen. Pre-fees, feasibility, permitting. You're not going to see a penny until you've done those. You can't do the pre-feasibility study until you've got sufficient backup to pass scrutiny from the banks in particular and their technical experts to support the assumptions that are in that study. It just won't happen, right? So it doesn't matter how much I want to do it on one nice little test that shows it works or whatever. I know full well from my time with my friends at VHP and the hoops I used to have to jump through in there to get a project approved. Do it right, do it once, and do it all. Because if you don't, you'll hit a brick wall and you'll have to come back and do it anyway. So I'm sorry, it's going to take time. You said dilutive. We currently have $30 million in the bank, Canadian, still. When we started 18 months ago, we had 35. So we spent $5 million so far. In that time, we've done the met test work to get us to the point we are today. We did a PEA. We did over 12,000 meters of PQ drilling. We're not wasting money just on overhead. We're working consciously, economically, on the things that matter that have to feed into that next step, which is the pre-feasibility study. And the one thing that is critical today that we have to get is an appropriate level of metallurgical understanding beyond one test.
Right. So PFS coming up next. You kind of, where are you in the process? Are we halfway yet? Do you know?
On the
Well, the network, because
where
this is
are
the
we?
key. This is why I wanted to speak to you. I wanted to get into the weeds here about this one because I know how complex it is, and I know, engineers want to perfect everything, but I want to try and understand the timing of this because the market wants to understand the timing of this, which is at some point you got to put a flag in the sand and say, right, we're good enough to go now, right? And by good enough, here's what I mean in terms of the economics. Pre-fees will, PEA, whatever, right? But PFS, you're starting to get a little bit more serious, and it's a very serious market out there. I won't go into today, but inflation, supply chain issues, personnel, you name it, right? What's the timing of that? Are we looking at the end of next year? Are we looking? What do you think?
Look. I was hoping that my results would have been better than 30% in 128 days and 60% gold recovery and so on. But we are where we are. We need to do the tweaking work, and we would have done this anyway, even if the results had come out higher. The insanity of some of this is the financiers and their technical experts would have sat there and looked at me and said, Alan, what happens if you crush it a bit finer? Is that a better economic outcome? What happens if you run it for a bit longer? What's the and it always comes back to the economic impact, right? So again, you may as well do it, otherwise you're going to get clobbered anyway. I need to do it because I'd like the recoveries to be closer to where they were in the PEA, because I quite like the answer from the PEA.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing when you sit in front of bankers like me. We become engineers and chemists overnight. What if questions come out? So right. Can I just ask, so people kind of get some sort of satisfaction that you are, doing, well, you're showing them that you're doing things the right way. How many multiple tests are going on? You weren't running one and then sort of doing a sequential series of tests. It's how many concurrent tests are going on, and what sort of things are you testing for in terms of those variables?
I did one, then I did a bunch of time series ones, which was another 14, I think it was. I've now got another 24 running at the moment. So as
representative ore of the ore that you want to go after first, do you know where you want to go first?
Yes, it's all focused on the intrusive and the intrusive breccia.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, because every pit that's ever been run on that deposit always mines the same stuff first. So you may as well learn and focus on this first stuff that's going to come out of the ground, and that's the intrusive. So, where are we? The columns around finer crush, different reagent strengths, different irrigation rates and timing, and all the various variables that I mentioned in the press release, the majority of them are already underway. Because I knew I'd have to do it anyway. So, as columns came free, I already knew what I was going to do next, and so there some of those are already running. The majority of them probably running. The only one that's not yet is the HPGR, because I need a special piece of equipment to crush it, and there's one available in Vancouver, and I've got a sample queued up to go through that. So once I got that, I'll put that on as well. I've got some empty columns.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it's you mentioned towards the end of next year with the PFS. Yeah, that's probably a reasonable. Because the other thing to remember, that coming back to those two graphs, the first graph took 128 days. And this is where it gets perverse. As I test the things to make it better, make it worse. I don't want to make it worse, but some of them will be negative, right? The negative ones I know early, because the graph will be down here somewhere, right? The ones that are better will be up here somewhere. Well, if it's getting better, I've got to keep running it until I know what it does up here. So the ones that work, this is where it gets perverse. The ones that work have to run. The ones that don't work and stay down here somewhere, I stop in 30 days or 60 days and put the next variant on.
It's an interesting thing there because it's kind of like drilling. You kind of want to understand what's going on with it. So sometimes you're going to drill and not find stuff, but that's a point at which that's good data actually. And the same for you here.
Exactly.
You want to stress test stuff and go, well, I need to know what not to do. And where?
As much as what to do. Yes.
Yeah. So no, okay. But you're going to have to signal that to the market or they go, oh man, disaster. No, okay, I understand.
It's not a
all over
disaster.
it. You're all over it, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So coming back to PFS in the next year, if you look at your PEA, obviously, I think with the data that you're showing here, perhaps you'd say, wow, do you know what? If we can change these numbers, the PEA numbers could look a lot better if we just kind of switch a few things, switch a bit of data in and around. It gives us a sense of where we're going to go. The PFS, what else? What are the other things apart from the MET component, which is, it seems to me like Pareto, 80% of what you need to crack here. What else do you need to be doing in the background to ensure that the PFS delivers numbers that you expect?
All of the other inputs. So if one reads the PEA carefully, you look for the word assumed, right? So you got to get rid of a lot of those assumptions. And for instance, power supply, right? We assume there's a substation 30, 40 kilometers away that feeds another mine. We assume that we can get the power from there. We need to get rid of that assumed word and actually know where, how much, how we're going to get power to site, right? Water's the same. Even the PFS that was done, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, assumed they were going to get the water out of the river that's nearby. There's a river at the bottom of the valley where we're putting the heap leach. To do that, you've got to have water rights and transfer them up the hill so that the extraction point is somewhere else, right? We're working on understanding the process and starting that process to get water rights, because the PEA and the size we're starting at, we know roughly how much water we need. That's not going to change a lot. But by the time you get to the PFS, you want to be able to say, this is where it's coming from, this is how much we can get, and we've started the process, and here's the overall water balance, and it's enough. Yeah. Access road. The previous study, the access road was fixed going down the valley and heading towards Sinaloa because that downhill, straight downhill is the easiest. But it was also anchored because there was a secondary plant down in Sinaloa that was where the autoclaves were, right? We don't have any autoclaves anymore. I don't need a road down to Sinaloa because that's where the autoclaves are. So we need to look at which road is the best road to come in to from Durango or up from Sinaloa. We've done the topo on the other route now that we didn't have before, so as I can do a trade-off between road A, road B. So again, it's getting rid of we have assumed, yeah, and do some more work on it. And that's the case with every study. And I think I've said this to you before. A study gives you two things. It gives you something you can talk to the market about. Here we are, here we're going. I've got a proof of concept. I've got this, I've got that. Here's the PEA numbers, whatever. In the background, it also gives me a list of things that I need to go and firm up more information on so as I can support the next level of study, right? And so apart from the metallurgy, we're working on all that other stuff in the background, yeah? When we get to PFS, the next thing in front of that is the permit application. I can't do the permit application off of PEA because I don't have enough data in it. We've restarted the environmental monitoring so that the environmental data is coming up to speed so as we can tie it into the older data to be able to use that with the PS to do our permit application, which wasn't running before.
Right. So what in terms of, okay, you got 30 million bucks, you burnt through only 5 million in 18 months, right? PFS, they tend to cost money. Are you going to blow through that 30 million before delivering the PFS, or do you, what's it going to cost you, do you think?
No, look, what a lot of people forget, the most expensive component of all of your studies is drilling, and more damn drilling. Yeah, and if you look back through it, that's where all the money goes. This thing has been drilled pretty consistently across all of it. We just need to check on the most recent drilling and tie it all together. But I don't expect there to be a lot of drilling, if any more. And the rest of it, the metallurgical test work, it's 100,000 a month or something that I'm running. So, it'd have to run a long time for me to burn through $30 million. And the same with the studies. The studies with the engineering companies don't actually cost you as much money as you think. It's all the other stuff, if you haven't already got it, to support everything. Yeah. The only thing out there that might show up is, potentially, again, bankers and others that are reviewing this before you finance it, is whether we do or don't need to build a pilot plant. And I think we've discussed that before. I'm not a big fan of them because I'm not a big believer in one sample for one place once to represent a 30-year mine life. I think that's almost bordering on insanity.
Yeah. So I've just noticed I've been doing you an injustice. You've got 20 million ounces of gold and 560 million ounces of silver. I apologize profusely. But okay, so money's good, process is good. In fact, it's kind of process light in a way, where if you don't have to do too much drilling, maybe a little bit of infill in places to test what you've got. But that's kind of interesting. So this is all comes down to this technical process that you're going through. Are you going to talk more often to market? Because we don't see enough of you. You don't. It feels like you don't share enough of what's going on. I'm putting in an official complaint on behalf of me. You know what I mean? Because there's kind of interesting. Some of this is actually quite interesting once you understand it. And this is the first time we've kind of been through it in a little bit more detail in terms of the test work that you're doing, and perhaps more importantly, as a mine builder, how you think about putting this process together. Because it's felt like historically it had something. It was going to be huge, one of the world's best, and then it just got hit. There's a big curveball came in, and people have gone off of it, and perhaps it's slightly tainted. So, what are you going to do in terms of helping us?
Yeah, I think it was tainted because of the old version of what the project was. Yeah, this $3.5 billion don. Right. I think people are so accustomed for development studies being a biannual drill program results forever and a year. And then eventually one day they do a PEA, then they do an update of the PEA and another update of the PEA, and then they do 3 pre-feasibility studies. God bless them, eventually one day they might actually build it, if they don't get bought out in the process. A realistic to even optimistic mine development program from discovery hole to production is 10 years. 10 years. That's before hiccups. That's before governments, constitutional changes, coups, and anything else that can happen to mess it up in the process. I can name you some copper deposits that were discovered in the 40s, and they're still interesting deposits.
Yeah, well, I know.
Yeah.
I know. There's 10 big development projects being held up right now. That's the truth. We've talked about them on our copper show. It's crazy. No, lots of ways that this thing can fall over. I get it. I guess I'm trying to kind of look for the things, or have you helped me point to the things which matter to you to manage properly. I get the infrastructure component here, and obviously you're going through the process technically, but it's fair enough that people doubt the process because it's just been a long time in the coming, long time in the making, right? So you have a job to do to help people understand it better and why it's 359 million capex instead of 3.5 billion market cap.
So now it's a lot easier. Now I've got some results out in the market. I can actually explain it works. It needs tweaking, right? This is the equivalent of my discovery story. If you drew the parallel, that column test is your discovery hole. That is it, right? You just you whack the hole in and you drilled 300 meters at 1.5% copper and you're over the moon. You've got no idea how much else it is, right? That's that. The next step is, in an exploration story, is go drill more holes, which they do one by one, and they put them out one by one. And if they don't get a good one, they put another one next to a good one. I'm getting cynical, right? This is okay. I've got something that works. Draw the parallel to the pharmaceutical industry. I tried some cocktail, and it looks like it's Viagra all over again. Now I got to give it to 1,000 men and see if it works on all of them, right? And some of them it doesn't work on. So how effective is it? So I've got to see that chart. No, but you know what I mean? So I've got my discovery hole. I've got my proof of concept. So rather than it's no longer a theory. It's the next step along. We're in the what?
No, it's just pure smut and innuendo on my part with discovery holes and Viagra charts. I'm slightly lost as to where this is going. So,
the next step is to find out which way it works better and it goes faster and gets where it needs to be faster, and then is where it needs to be, that 70, 75. Or is 60 and 50 as good as it's going to get? But then with the grade increase, I'm still in the same place. But I don't know that yet.
Right. And all the market wants to know is get a sense of when you will know that. But look, we've talked about this a bit. I think this is, in terms of enough information to digest, I think we're there. And what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, we get it. You're trying to fix a problem which you believe is fixable, and you're starting to show that it can be. But as you say, the current numbers, 60%, it's probably not quite there yet. So time-wise, your words, you said to me earlier, you said 60% is not quite there yet on the economics, right? You wouldn't
No, I didn't say that. I did not say it's not quite there on the economics. No. It's not where I'd like it to be, because I believe the potential is in that 70 to 75% range or better. We put that number in based on some intelligent guesswork in the PEA, which is all PEAs really are, semi-intelligent guesswork. And I'd obviously like to see me be able to say, there you go, I've matched the numbers in the PEA and now we're moving forward and I understand better how it works, faster, shorter times, whatever. because the shorter time also has an impact on my capital costs and working capital, right? So there's an incentive to try and get that better across everything.
Okay, so
It's simple
it's not quite
economics.
there yet. It's not quite there yet. You want it to be better. You think you can get it better.
All right,
you want to make it better.
I'll tell you what, Matt. I'll go away. I'll pull up the model. I'll run 60% and 50% recoveries through, and I'll guarantee you it's still better than 15% rate of return, which is what would get financed. In fact, it's probably still in the 20+ range.
Good. Can you do that? I'd love to see that.
And then when I add the 10% grade back on, it'll go back to where we were. Right? But wobble your arms around and you do the pluses and minuses and pluses and minuses, and you end up in the same place. Yeah. And that's honestly, that's where I feel 60% and 50% is good enough at the moment. I'd like to see it better, because the other thing we also know is PEAs tend to be a little bit on the optimistic side, and the results tend to only go in one direction.
Glad you said it.
I've been doing this too long.
Yeah, well, but it's a fair point. When people want something to work, they'll believe a PEA. But when it all goes wrong, they'll go, "What the hell was that PEA about?" Because it's I always say plus or minus 30%, but I think in today's environment, it's a lot worse than that. We've seen feasibility studies get blown out of the water because the economics is a slightly different paradigm at the moment. There's an economic environment which is just not so mining friendly, so marginal projects don't work anymore. They don't work anymore. And that's why your degree of certainty that you were striving for is important here. And I just think, I want to understand what that number needs to look like for you. You don't have the answer at the moment because you're still doing some test work, right? But we would want to know relatively quickly a number that you think you can get to, and two, that you think would make this a super attractive project, and in a maybe worse economic climate, stop it becoming a marginal project, which seems difficult with a project this size, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So here's an interesting statement for you, and I'll challenge you to go back and prove me wrong. Cutoff grades, certainly in the copper business, and I wouldn't be surprised in gold either. Cutoff grades in open pit copper mines have not moved in 30 years. The cutoff grade. So that's the minimum it makes a penny. Yeah? And it's been sitting around 0.2 to 0.3 for 30 years, even though the copper price has been as low as 60 cents and as high as $4.50. The cutoff grade has not changed. Now, how is that possible? It's because we've maintained margins despite 2008, despite copper running from 90 cents up to $4 between 2002, 2001 to 2006. The cutoff grade hasn't moved, right? Because margins get maintained. The only way you can bring in an uneconomic project these days is change the technology to completely change your cost curve. That's the only way you can do it. Yeah. And then the margins will change on the older technology and they'll become uneconomic.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but so does copper price. That, if copper price has higher highs, higher lows, then, the cutoff grade will average down, right? It
hasn't though.
I did the
Agua study in 95, 96 for BHP in Northern Orion. Cutoff grade was 0.25, was over 1 billion tons. Capital cost was $760 million to build it. Internal rate of return, I think, was like 17, 18% with a 90 cent or $1 copper price. 1995. Go look at the big copper projects today. The cutoff grade is still 0.25. The capital cost is now $5 billion, and the metal price is $4.
Yeah, we're getting into a copper conversation for a gold silver company. That's probably not where we want to be, but I wouldn't mind talking to you, and not certainly someone who's just bought a bloody copper mine. I want to believe we're running out of copper. So I will go and look at some of that information you've given us. But I better let you go, as they say, when you're closing a conversation. So, look, Alan, I really appreciate you making the time, and a lot of time at that, to get into the weeds, deal with a few, difficult questions, but answer, market sentiment somewhat, and again, update us on how you're going with your projects. I appreciate your time today, but stay in touch, and please speak to us soon.
Yep, I will. When I've got something to talk about, you'll be hearing from me.